Welcome to Best Served Cold, a Bald Millennials podcast, where we drink wine and talk about crime.
Presented to you by Tama J and Laura Elise. And now we're starting.
Now we're starting. Okay, so welcome to the episode. What you don't know is Tama and I have just currently suffered through about an hour of technical difficulties trying to get these fucking microphones set up.
What feels like years of our lives spent trying to get this fucking show running.
So we have some alternative equipment this evening. So if everything is a little bit more ambient, if you can hear us moving or shifting or the fridge in the background, we apologize. It's only going to be for one episode. Our equipment decided to shit itself as we were setting up.
So we use dynamic microphones, which if you know what microphones are, they're like stage microphones, which tend to not pick up as much. They just pick up vocals. We've had to switch to studio mics, which pick up fucking everything unless you have a treated broom designed for these kind of mics.
And we don't. Instead, we have our living room and 3 cats.
Yeah.
So
this is going to be a fucking disaster.
Cheers.
Woo! All right. Well,
look, it's not going to be forever.
Yeah. And we were saying before, this is going to be our dedicated ASMR episode.
Welcome to the ASMR murder. It's the creepiest thing to do in ASMR as well.
Cold. Today we're going to be reading about a serial killer who walked up to people and whispered in their ears like this.
The Whisper Killer.
The Whisper Killer. He owned 3 cats and had a podcast.
Spoiler alert, it's actually
his equipment stopped working, so he killed
so
his
he went on a murderous rampage. Oh wait, that me. No, but seriously, it's not going to be. This is not going to be the norm.
So hopefully for one episode, I have the good fortune of working for an audio company, so
we should be able to sort our shit out.
We should be able to fix it up.
Yeah.
If not, then we'll figure something out.
We'll figure it. It's not going to be forever, we promise. But exciting, because this is the first episode we've recorded since we've actually been launched.
Yeah, it is. So we've actually started showcasing the show on Apple Podcasts.
Which made all these technical difficulties so much more stressful.
Yeah, considering the fact that we now have an actual dedicated schedule to like properly follow. Like if we don't record this episode, like when the fuck are we going to record it at all?
Anyway.
Shit.
Well, shit.
So yeah, that's this has been our life for the past hour or two.
But yeah, we've really appreciated the support that we've got from everyone, all the lovely messages.
Yeah, it's been great. I'd like to apologize. When we released the first episode, we had just some editing issues, which we quickly fixed up. It happens. I'm not going to pretend like we're
Look, let's be real. We have 3 cats. Stuff's gonna go
We're
wrong.
fucking stressed, all right? Just give us a break.
People who say animals are not the same as children, I understand you, but I would like to argue that 3 cats is at least like the equivalent of like half a baby.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like it's a little human, sure. We have 3 cats, and one of them is a fucking terror.
She shit on the floor yesterday.
Yeah, it's not pretty, sis. It's not
anyway,
pretty.
that's not what we came here to talk about. We came here to talk about murder.
Oh, yeah. The show that we have dedicated to...
That's right. We're here for a reason, not just to bitch about our children. Fur children.
Yeah, that's for bored millennials.
So, I went first for the last 2 weeks.
Yes,
so
you
I
did.
Strongly feel...
And I feel like yours is a bit more topical and a bit more...
pop culture.
Yeah. And I mean, people have read the show title, so I
don't want to give it away. Oh yeah, they've read the show title.
That's what I mean. Every single time we've been like, "Oh, we'll save it for when we get to it."
And
But
I'm
it's
like, "Oh yeah, that's right. They're not here in our living room.
No,
they have the show title.
They have the show title.
The explanation when we tell them what we talk about.
This is how they're watching the episode right now.
I'm going to be talking about it's technically not murder as far as what it's been declared. Well, my opinion's changed after doing research.
Oh, really?
My opinion
Wow.
I've done a 180.
She's done a
360?
full 180.
No, 180.
360
360 would be like changing and then going
Yeah,
back
and
to your
then
original opinion. I've done a 180.
That's like a 5G.
But yeah, I'm going to be
debacle.
talking about Carole Baskin's husband, Don Lewis from Tiger King, and his
Interesting.
mysterious disappearance and some of the conspiracy theories.
I'm very interested to see how you made a 180 on the situation, because there seemed to be a lot of evidence leading on one side heavily.
Well, yeah, apparently some of that surprise was a bit dramatized to make the show a bit more popular. Anyway,
Netflix, what have you
Don't wanna
done?
give it away.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just going to end up, I'll start talking and then I'll go first again. So
Yeah,
I'm going to let
and-
you go.
As I'm sure you're aware, by reading the title of the show, I am talking about the Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo, who... What is... Oh my God. I swear...
She's been asleep for like 2 hours.
If you're at home, every single episode of this podcast is just going to be a drinking game for every single time we get interrupted by our cat. She's currently jumping onto our office chairs.
What are you doing?
She's fine like that. I think just leave her like that. She's okay. She's probably going to suicide jump off the chair, which, look, if she breaks her legs,
Well,
she
no,
can't...
'cause if she breaks her legs, that's like a $4,000 vet bill. So no, thank you.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'll be talking about the Golden State Killer, which has blown the fuck up, like, in the past couple of years.
Yeah, like the past 2 years, I'd say, because he
Yeah.
got caught
2018.
2018.
Yeah. And it's still in, like, the trial. Like, it hasn't got trial yet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's going to be a few years before it goes to trial, which I will explain why at some point. But
Give us that backstory we love.
so I wanted to
Juicy
take a bit of a
backstory.
dive into. I got a lot of shit which basically goes into things regarding this whole the murder mysteries and who he is and how they caught him. It's kind of all over the place that I don't really know where to start. But I guess
I almost started singing Sound of Music. Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start.
Can you do it right up to the microphone whispering?
Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start.
That's so creepy, man. It was kind of popularized by freelance writer Michelle McNamara, who
Love her.
was married to Patton Oswalt, famous actor. So she started writing about this killer, who was at the time was known as the very horrible name, the East Area Rapist, or EAR for short, which is just not a very good name. I mean, don't make it sound pretty, but like ear, the ear. It's like, what the fuck is that? It's just bizarre.
It's very fitting with our ASMR episode.
He was referred to as the ear, kind of like the ear that I'm whispering in right now. ASMR of me drinking red wine.
Noise. So bad.
You have to
Okay.
aerate it to get the
We're
full
gonna-
taste out of it.
We're going to promise you we're going to stop doing ASMR.
Okay.
Maybe.
Um,
Probably.
So, McNamara in 2006 began a blog and a podcast called True Crime Diaries. And now in this podcast and blog, she shared clues with a community of people who shared her passion for trying to catch the East Area Rapist. In 2013, she wrote an article about the year in Los Angeles magazine called In the Footsteps of a Killer, which she gave him the now notorious name, the Golden State Killer. She also wrote a book called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, where she interviews detectives and compiles information across various jurisdictions that had never been pieced together before. One investigator from the Contra Costa County Police Department, I don't know if I pronounce that right. American city names are really bizarre.
Yeah, they have
for
some
me.
weird names because you think they'd just be like stock standard English sounding names.
Yeah, but
they're not.
they're not. They're really not. It's and they're in California and Sacramento, where you think the
Are
names.
they Native American words? Is that where they come from? Do you think?
I think so. But
that would make sense.
The thing is, they come from areas in California, and you kind of think oh, I know most of the areas in California.
California's huge.
I know.
Because I think when you say California, you immediately think beaches and the OC.
But no,
it's huge.
It's fucking huge.
Yeah.
And there's 3 parts to it. There's,
Yeah.
I think isn't it, I think it's either California or LA where they have 3 different districts that can vote. It's that big. I
Sounds
can't
about
remember. We're not up to date on our American
Geography?
geography. I was going to say history, but it's not really history.
It's okay. Americans aren't up on geography at all. Did
Yeah.
you know I found out this week apparently they don't do geography in high school?
What?
Yeah, it's not a thing.
How do you-
Apparently. Allegedly.
Jesus
Someone
Christ.
told me that on TikTok.
Okay. I wouldn't trust that as a reliable source, but okay. So, to go back onto Michelle McNamara. So she's kind of famous for essentially, in a sense, catching the Golden State Killer.
And it happened after she passed, which is so sad.
Which is very sad. So I want to get into a bit of his early life, and then I'll get into how he got caught and kind of how he got notorious and how evidence got pieced together. But essentially, it's all thanks to Michelle McNamara and her works in her book where she interviews a man named Paul Hall, who was an investigator. It's all got to do with DNA, things that McNamara and her husband Patton Oswald passed on to investigators. It's all very don't fuck with cats.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
You know? And like what you were saying in our previous podcast where we teased the idea of having the Golden State Killer as a podcast episode, the Unsolved Mysteries TV show. Kind of like the idea of that where it's trying to get people to help with unsolved mysteries. Without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right into Joseph DeAngelo's early life. So he was born in New York in 1945, lived a relatively normal early life, born to father also named Joseph DeAngelo and mother Kathleen DeGroat. Now, not a lot is known about his early life, and a lot of the details early pre-crime is very hazy. No one really knows.
Dude,
much.
you are flailing that glass around.
It's fine. It's barely...
Deeply stressing me out.
Okay. I can't put it on the table because it's too far away. Also, don't interrupt me.
I'm sorry, but
or I will.
I just saw my
get
life
very
flash
upset.
before my eyes. This couch is really expensive.
It's fine. I got it, dude. So not a lot's known about his early life. His father was a celebrated pilot in the Air Force during World War II, and his mother was a waitress at a Denny's. During their marriage, and I think after his birth, they would later divorce. And Kathleen later married her second husband, and they moved to California. So, as I said before, not much is known about his early home life, but a note that he left behind in a crime scene might provide some insight into what his early home life was like. So he left a note behind that was titled "The Homework Evidence,"
The
homework evidence.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it out word for word. And I quote: "Mad is the word that reminds me of the 6th grade. I hated that year. I wish I had know what was going on." By the way, he's dyslexic, I believe, so he can't spell perfectly. I wish I had known what was going to be going on during my 6th grade year, the last and worst year of elementary school. Mad is the word that remains in my head about my dreadful year as a 6th grader. My madness was one that was caused by disappointments that hurt me very much. Disappointments from my teacher, such as field trips that were planned then cancelled. My 6th grade teacher gave me a lot of disappointments which made me very mad and made me build a state of hatred in my heart. No one ever let me down that hard before, and I never hated anyone as much as I did him. Disappointment wasn't the only reason that made me mad in my 6th grade class. Another was getting in trouble at school, especially talking. That's what really bugged me, was writing sentences, those awful sentences that my teacher made me write. Hours and hours I'd sit and write 50, 100, 150 sentences a day and night. I write these dreadful paragraphs which embarrassed me, and more important, it made me ashamed of myself, which in turn, deep down inside, made me realize that writing sentence wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to make me suffer like that. It just wasn't fair to make me sit and write until my bones ached, until my hand felt a very horrid pain it ever had. And as I wrote, I got madder and madder until I cried. I cried because I was ashamed. I cried because I was disgusted, which is also spelled discusted. I cried because I was mad, and I cried for myself. Kid who kept on having to write those Dane sentences. My angriness from 6th grade will scar my memory for life, and I will be ashamed for my 6th grade year forever.
So,
Are you okay?
so this little story may not be as funny to anyone listening to this podcast,
God.
but I had a former employer whose
Oh,
second language
yeah.
was English.
Oh, shit, yeah.
And that he was a bit strange, and I think he was maybe in love with me. And when I quit my job, he was sending me all these like weird, inappropriate messages, and they all just sounded,
It's like a breakup.
yeah, like 10 times I have been crying today.
Yeah, he was
just
like
that
so upset.
strange-
He's like betrayed and fucking distraught.
Maybe he was, I won't say his name, but maybe he was the Golden State Killer all along.
Maybe.
It's
Yeah.
not Joseph DeAngelo.
No.
It's
So yeah, that wonderful piece of literature.
that was beautiful.
Yeah, it really was. Like 0 punctuation in that whole thing, besides commas. Really,
So no, it was just one long sentence.
it's. I believe. Yeah, I'm looking for it right now. It's one long. No, actually, there's a few. Maybe 1 or 2 full stops in that whole thing. So what's interesting about this is some people think that it is like a insight into his early home life. Some people think because he was a very intelligent criminal that it's a
Planted
red herring
evidence, yeah.
to throw off investigators. So to kind of confuse him with his backstory and his motives for the crime. So
And also it would make him seem like an imbecile, so they would probably not be looking for anyone that was like
Exactly.
an upstanding
Exactly.
member of the community.
So he did a lot of those things, which we'll eventually get into. So to go back into his early life, he attended Folsom High School in Sacramento, and then later California State University in Sacramento to earn a degree in criminal justice. He joined the Navy after graduation and served in the Vietnam War, which, to go on to correlations in serial killers, a lot of them serve in war. Son of Sam served in the
Yeah,
military.
or have like army positions.
Some sort of gun dispossession.
Yeah, I think who did I talked about someone like 2 weeks ago that served in the army. I've forgotten now.
Well, that's not good. That's not what you want out of the host of a show.
Well, it's too much. My brain can't hold all this.
Yeah, I
horrible
know.
stuff,
It's
otherwise
very,
I'll just
very
cry.
horrid things. But essentially, a lot of the people we talk about have either had head injuries, trauma in their early years, or served in the military.
army. Or a combination of all three.
So in the late 60s, he was engaged to a young woman named Bonnie Colwell. Now, remember that name, Bonnie Colwell, because she's a very important part of this backstory.
Okay.
So she worked as a lab assistant in Liara College. At some point during the engagement, she called off the engagement, and this supposedly completely broke DeAngelo's heart. No one knows exactly why they broke up or why she dumped him, but according to sources that talk to Bonnie's brother, she supposedly had plenty of reasons to call it off.
He was a serial killer, so I would say...
Not at this point.
Well, no, but he had the personality of a serial
And
killer.
later on in his life, there's a lot of people regarded him as a very violent and angry man. So, do the math. So, similar to the hatred that he endured for his teacher in his note, he seemed to have never let go of the fact that Bonnie had dumped him.
Right.
So that's why people sort of think that it's a bit up in the air, where it could actually be something he's written about himself. So then we're going into the 1970s. In 1973, DeAngelo marries Sharon Marie Huddle, and they have 3 daughters together throughout their marriage. In 1974, he graduates from the police academy and becomes an officer in Visalia, California. 1975, a police officer was shot and killed by a criminal known as the Visalia Ransacker. Or, again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Visalia
Sounds
Ransacker.
right. I'll buy it.
Now, later on, when he gets caught, they connect the dots. And in 1975, when this police officer was shot and killed by a criminal called the Visalia Ransacker, they connect it to DeAngelo.
Oh, so he was the ransacker.
He was the Ransacker.
Oh.
So there's this
A man of many names.
string of robberies that he was then connected to.
Right.
Everything that was connected to the Visalia Ransacker, he was responsible for it. And then in 1976, he is transferred to Auburn Police Department, where he was later that year caught stealing dog repellent and a hammer from a grocery store. The police department then fired him, but they didn't look into him at all in terms of his record or if he was connected to any crimes or whatever. They just let him go. After being fired, and this gives you a bit of a insight into why maybe his engagement broke over. After being fired, DeAngelo threatens to kill the police chief, Nick Willock. A few days after being threatened, the police chief's daughter runs into his room in the middle of the night saying there's a man outside shining a flashlight into a bedroom. When he walks outside to check, he finds shoe imprints outside his daughter's window.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yep. Now, with that is all we have on his early life backstory,
Okay.
the start
Alright.
of his. That's
Yeah.
literally all we have. There might be more, but it's not really significant or relevant. As I said, his early life was fairly normal, disregarding the threats of killing people.
Yeah.
So his first recorded victim was a ransacking in Visalia, California in 1974. So this was after he had joined the police force. He started his crime spree. He was sloppy. He didn't wear a mask. He was easily identifiable to police. His victims could easily identify him as who he was. So at the time, he was 29 years old, but he looked younger than he did for his age. Many people thought that the person who was ransacking them was in their teens or their early 20s. And according to a writer called Billy Jensen, he's spoken to many of the victims of when he was ransacking, and they claim that he was even murdering around that time, long before his first actual murder.
Okay.
However, the reason why it's so hazy, and why I think he never really got caught was in the 70s, various jurisdictions didn't communicate with each other over their own cases.
They didn't talk.
No.
It was like a weird
It's
pissing contest.
Like these are our cases, we handle it ourselves, which is actually delved into on Mindhunter if you're interested in watching that show.
And that series Impossible, about the rapist, that's based off a true story, who works in the army, so he knows how the jurisdictions work, so he gets away with it because he skips around jurisdiction.
Exactly like DeAngelo. If you remember, he's a police officer.
Yeah, so he
knows exactly what's going on. So he knows that if he goes from county to county, which is exactly what he did, he would commit crimes in certain counties after learning.
Never be linked.
Yeah. After learning from his mistakes, he would then move on from going to county to county. He would go one to another, to another, to another. So they would never link these all together. So like I said, he kind of like, picks up the case a bit, learns from his mistakes. Oh God. My microphone just going haywire. He learns from his mistakes and begins to wear a black ski mask and kind of starts to plan out his like a strategy for each crime that he then commits forward. One example of which would be the police sketches and profilings from his victims were like almost perfectly depicting DeAngelo. So what he did was he lost a huge amount of weight so he would look different to how he did when he committed the crimes. What he also did was he targeted one-story houses with similar layouts, so it was easier for him to tell how many people were in the house. Because when he started, he was targeting women who were just home alone.
Yeah.
He drove around the neighborhoods and sketched out maps in order to make his escape throughout the night. And after breaking into their houses, he would often search through their purses and find their driver's license to learn their names. So then when he approached the victims, he would then whisper their names to make them wonder about the possibility of maybe it was someone that they actually knew. And he wanted them to think that he knew them from somewhere.
Well, because there's also, I guess, a sense of inbuilt politeness that you feel when someone knows your name, and that panic you get when someone knows your name and you're like, oh, fuck. Yeah, hey, you?
It was more so to again, throw witnesses and police off. Like, he doesn't know who the fuck they are. So if he pretends like he knows who they are, and he would then also he would find out like their hobbies. Like, for example, there was one couple who had a boat in their driveway. So he told the wife, I know you, I've seen you at the river.
Yeah, that's creepy.
So, and he's obviously never seen them, but he picks them at random. He has no idea who they are.
Super creepy.
Very creepy, but very intelligent. Excuse me. So when he, as I said, he takes notice of their hobbies. Sometimes he would give the victims lies about themselves, like he said to one victim, "Don't tell the pigs about my van outside." He never had a van. It's never there. He never drove a van, never even drove a car. He would steal bikes from open garages, ride them to the houses, then escape with them and dump them. So again, throwing people off. So when he started attacking, when he upgraded from attacking just women home alone to couples, he would come with pre-tied shoelaces. He would tie the men down and place a stack of plates on their backs.
Oh,
and
it's this guy.
Yeah. So he told them, if they moved and got up, he would hear the plates crashing and he would know that he's coming to get him. So he would immediately kill their wives if he hears these plates crashing.
Which, of course, you're then gonna not move.
Yeah. So they were forced to just lie there.
And listen to their wives being raped.
Yeah, exactly. So he would often switch up his weapons that he would use. Like he would use knives, blunt objects. One time he beat someone to death with a log from the fireplace they had.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's fucking brutal. Again, to throw people off, it's like he doesn't have a signature anything. It's literally could just seem random. Now, there is one sole factor that pieced all these things together besides DNA. Can you guess what it is?
No. Well, the fact that he's targeting couples.
No. His body.
His body.
Each and every one of his rape victims that gave a description of him described him as having an extremely small penis.
That is the best thing I've ever heard.
Extremely.
Well, he was compensating for something, obviously.
Investigators asked doctors for known patients, and they're trying to rule out suspects here.
Yeah.
So they asked to like about patients who had quote micro penises.
Can you just imagine, though? Imagine that you're a man who is a genuine suspect in all these murders, and like for some reason there's like DNA that puts you at all the scenes, and like there's all this weird stuff, and then they pull you in and the cops are like, all right buddy, drop your dax, and they're like, well, it can't be him because you, sir, have an enormous
Literally,
cock.
that's literally what they did. They ruled out people who were too well endowed.
Yes.
Not even big, just regular dicks.
Can you imagine like the weird sense of pride as well? You'd be like, well,
Yeah.
cool,
So you're not the murderer.
not a murderer, and I have a big dick.
Great. Awesome. That's the first time we've been proud to have 5 inches.
Also, it's just adding new meaning to the term big dick energy.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really fucking
That's
is.
the greatest thing I've ever heard. Please continue.
It's that was, like you said, the best thing I think about researching this was just learning that. So he obviously got off on the fact that he was instilling fear into his victims. One of his tricks that he would
His
use
tiny penis.
with his tiny penis, with his small dick energy, one of his tricks that he would use to make sure he would absolutely escape without a doubt was he would, after committing the rape, he would then wait and hide inside the house. Now, oftentimes, and this is very, 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 very sad, he would tie up, as I said before, husbands, but sometimes he would also tie up their children. And he would put them on the bed next to their mothers while he was raping them.
Oh, that's
It was terrifying, terrible.
that's horrible.
What he would do in cases like that with either the husband or the child was he would, when he was finished committing the rape, he would then wait in the house. And in one case, after the rape was committed, a mother was right next to her daughter, and when she asked her daughter, "Are you all right?" her daughter said, "Shh, mummy." He was still in the house, in the room, hiding in the dark. So whenever the mother started talking again, thinking he was gone, he would press down on the bed right next to her head to let her know that he was there. She sat motionless for hours.
Wait,
I
is this
think it
the
was
kid or the mother?
The mother.
So the mother's on the bed.
They're both on the bed.
Okay.
The mother and the kid are on the bed.
And she's blindfolded, I'm assuming.
It wasn't actually specified, but
Okay.
I assume so.
Yeah.
It's also dark, and he's wearing a balaclava. I mean, he's hiding in the shadows.
Yeah. Okay.
So he would let her know that he was still there. Every
That's-
single time she would pipe up again.
That's
So
creepy.
she would then just sit still, not making a peep for hours. I think it was about it was like it was 4 or 6 hours or something before she even managed to make the call that the criminal had broken into a house and rapes her, completely ensuring his escape.
Yeah.
So, to make it even fucking worse, months and sometimes years after the assaults, he would often call his victims to taunt them on Christmas Day.
Oh, that's...
And he would threaten them, telling them he would come back to finish the job. So, it's very unfortunate, but the majority of his victims all have PTSD.
I'm not surprised.
And
Way to
because
ruin Christmas.
He's like the Black Dahlia and the Zodiac. Was never caught until to this point.
Until recently, yeah.
So many of these victims never had, closure until recently. They never knew that they were never safe.
Can you imagine though, so when was this? This was in the 70s?
This was during the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, so can you imagine getting a call almost 50 years after you've been attacked and someone tells you, we've caught him, he's in jail? Can you imagine? It makes me want to cry thinking about it.
It's horrible. It's really fucking horrible. So later in the 70s, a woman named Carole Daly, she worked for the Sacramento County Police Department, right? And they held a town hall meeting to discuss the East Area Rapist. During this time, around 6,000 guns were sold within a month. Locksmiths were hired to make deadlocks for the doors so people couldn't bust in. A lot of security dogs were bought. During the meeting where they were discussing what to fucking do about this person. And one man stood up and proclaimed that he didn't believe that the East Area Rapist was real because he, and I quote, couldn't fathom that any man would allow his wife to be raped while they were home.
I know this story.
A few months later, the same man and his wife became victims of the East Area Rapist.
Yeah, and that was how they realized that he was...
He was in the meeting.
They took the photo of the big meeting and... Yeah.
He was there. He was there.
So creepy.
Without a doubt, he was there.
Yeah.
They can't prove it, but he was there. Okay.
Either that or it's the biggest coincidence ever.
God, it couldn't be though. It's such a cocky thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, be like, fuck you. You don't think it can happen?
No. Later on in DeAngelo's life, he obviously was fired as a police officer, so his next profession was to be a big rig driver for a grocery store called Save Mart. According to his co-workers, he was a well-behaved man and acted like he was afraid of ever getting in trouble, so he wouldn't, stick around talking or, do anything that might get anyone, including himself, in trouble. He was never late for work, and he was never caught in sick. 1986, all crimes related to the East Area Rapist stop. That's it.
They stop for until he's caught.
Completely, that's it.
Yeah.
Never one ever happens again.
Isn't that weird? So he's 40, in his 40s at that.
So he was 29 in the 70s, some point 74.
So yeah, early 40s probably.
He just completely stops. Cold turkey. No one knows why he's stopped, but it's speculated that it is due because this is the same year that his youngest daughter was born.
Yeah.
So, but he has 3 daughters, so it's why stop on the 3rd?
Yeah, no, that's weird.
You know what I mean?
I thought it was going to be his first kid.
No, his youngest daughter.
That's strange.
So it's his 3rd daughter. So I don't know, maybe the home life was too much. The wives and the kids are too demanding for his hobbies. You know how it is.
His hobbies.
Yeah.
Is it weird that I guess for me as a woman, obviously men can obviously also experience rape, but as a woman, to me it seems somewhat more awful to just be horrifically raped and left alive. because you then live with it for the rest of your life.
I think
Like,
it's
obviously not that being murdered is also not ideal. But
I think
like
it's in,
there's something more sad about...
It's an interesting point that you bring up, the distinction between raping a man and raping a woman, because it's definitely a thing.
Oh, men
and
can 100% be raped.
But,
I'm not
and we've
questioning
seen
that.
cases of men being raped and locked up and used
Yeah.
for sex, and it's like we like to make
Jeffrey Dahmer raped boys.
Yeah, exactly. And it's never really a thing that you can say, oh, you know, men can't be raped, but it is unfortunately primarily young women who are
I'm just more saying
prime
me
victim.
as a woman, I
left
can't
alive
imagine
afterwards. Yeah.
going through this horrific thing and then having to try and continue on with my relationship with my partner who hasn't gone, because they were all married. Can you imagine trying to continue on with your relationship with your husband after that?
During high school, we actually had these speakers come to our school. One of them opened up about the fact that his partner was raped in a closet, and he talks about his relationship.
Yeah,
with her
like how
afterwards,
do
and
you
it's just
continue with life?
like,
Because like you were saying, they all had PTSD.
yeah, exactly. And
Like
and
this-
he talks about, he's like there's never a moment where he's like, this is too much for me. It's just a constant state of grief for her.
Yeah, it would be.
It's a fucking horrible thing for someone you love, and this is before they were together. But to know that happened to someone, is fucking horrible.
But yeah, I don't know. Something about, like, obviously we talk a lot about really horrible murders, but for me personally, there's something about the idea of these women being horrifically attacked and then having to cope with it. That's just so awful.
It is. It's terrible. There is
This podcast gets really depressing sometimes.
that's why we gotta find something to like jovial it up afterwards, I guess. But anyway, I'll try not to take up too much time.
Micropenis.
Micropenises. The Golden State Killer has a micropenis.
Nothing to lighten the mood like a micropenis.
Okay, so let's fucking jump right back into it. In his later life, he had a reputation at home for being a very violent and angry man, and people would often avoid any interaction with him. One time, he left his neighbors a voicemail threatening to kill his entire family.
I mean, that's much.
The father then recognizes his voice and confronts him, to which DeAngelo tells him he left the voicemail because his dog was barking too much.
It's like the lady upstairs at the door.
Yeah, it really is. But she's gone now, so fuck off. You know?
Yeah.
His neighbors would often hear him screaming at his wife and daughters so loudly that they could hear it from their own houses. And this is like suburban Sacramento.
Yeah.
They're next to each other for sure. But
But
these
not
are like
that close.
these
Yeah.
are houses with insulation. These aren't Australian houses where they're fucking bricks and concrete with a little tiny layer of
asbestos shack.
yeah. This is like the real fucking deal. He was often yelling at himself in the front yard of his house, yelling things like, "I'll kill you, I'll kill you."
At himself.
At himself.
Weird. Very weird.
I don't know if this wasn't brought up earlier, but this was an interesting point that I wanted to bring up. I found out that a lot of his victims, told investigators that he would often sob to himself while committing the criminal activity, whether it was like stealing from them or raping them. He would often sob to himself, yelling, "I hate you, Bonnie! I hate you, Bonnie!" Yeah. So there's this connection to the whole
thing. He got dumped.
Aw.
Aww. It's never happened to anyone else on the face of the planet ever.
Yeah. So I want to get a bit more into how he was caught now.
Yes, let's.
So as I said, Michelle McNamara began her investigations as just I guess a person she just was dedicated to catching the Golden State Killer. That was her complete obsession, and she shared this obsession with investigator Paul Hall. So, to give a bit of context, recorded, over 51 women were raped in their own beds. He murdered at least 12 people. However, we don't know the exact figures.
Yeah.
It could be way higher. He would often call them up again, just to touch on these murders again. He would often call them up and say things like, "Remember when we played?"
Oh
Yeah.
no!
And it's just sorry. I'm going through my main points now, because these are all things that I wanted to bring up at some point. But there's as I said, there's so much content regarding this guy. And what's interesting is he was referred to this as the original Night Stalker.
Oh,
The OG Night Stalker. Which is
weird.
weird flex.
You don't want.
Yeah. So McNamara, as I said, she's writing this book in 2016. Sorry, not 2016. She's writing this book where she interviews men like Paul Hall. I believe this was like 2013. In 2016, unfortunately, Michelle McNamara passed away. This was on July 21st. April 21st. And it was due to a previously undiagnosed heart condition that she had and complications with ingesting medications including Adderall, Xanax, and fentanyl, I believe. Which is very, very unfortunate because she never got to see her handiwork, one, come to fruition, and two, actually catch the fucking person responsible.
Yeah.
Her one wish to husband Patton Oswalt was to get her book published. So by February 2018, the book is completely finished. I believe people helped finish the book. And one of the many leads that Paul Hall discussed with McNamara before she passed was the potential of DNA evidence found with genealogy websites like 23andMe. So what Paul Hall did was he would take DNA from rape kits and pitched the idea to many genealogy websites to try and use their online service database to match the DNA together.
Ooh.
And like I said, unfortunately, she never lived to be able to see this happen. So, in January 2018, Paul Hall used DNA from a crime scene, and actually worked with I don't know who the genealogy website was, but he managed to find a company that was willing to work with him, and so they found a connection to a third cousin. So they had something, they had a lead. And for context, this is 24 years in the making for Paul Hall. He's been trying to catch this guy for 24 years. He was just getting ready to retire, but he had this obsession with wanting to catch the Golden State Killer. And it was obviously not going to be an easy feat because Golden State Killer had been evading police for 44 years at this point. Now, what's interesting is they had that connection to the third cousin. They took that to the Sacramento County DA and assembled a task force to scour the entire family tree of that third cousin. Obviously, DeAngelo is part of that list. Previously, DeAngelo was never thought of a suspect of anything. So he was never even suspected for any of the crimes. Nothing. The day before Paul Halls is set to retire, he's sitting outside of DeAngelo's house. He's thinking to himself, this whole thing's been a failure. He's jaded from all the failures over 24 years. He thinks to himself, I'll just get DeAngelo's DNA so they can simply rule him out as a suspect, and I'll retire and pass this on to someone else. Distraught, that's it. But something inside of him tells him to just keep on going. He takes the DNA samples to this genealogy company. Doesn't inform DeAngelo. But he also needs more, obviously, DNA samples from DeAngelo to connect it. So what he does is the task force with him, they collect DNA from his fingerprints in public areas, like wiping his car door, and they find tissues in his trash can that they use to connect DNA. If they had approached DeAngelo for DNA, it takes a while for it to process with these companies. So he runs the risk of him being a flight risk.
Yeah,
him trying to escape or him trying to kill himself. So the Sacramento Task Force and the Crime Lab work non-stop to try and connect the dots to prove that this man is the killer. Police get a search warrant after the DNA comes back, proving that his DNA is connected to the crime scenes, and they arrest DeAngelo. DeAngelo is fucking shook.
As you would be.
Has no idea what the fuck is going on. He has no idea how they found him. Officers that were arresting him said they saw in his face that he was thinking of ways to try and escape. But it was too little too fucking late, boyo. Buddy boy. He didn't at all try to deny himself being the Golden State Killer. The only thing he ever said to police officers was, "There is a roast in the oven." To this day, and it's now 2020, I believe, this is still, again, hard to find, but he hasn't said a single word to police officers and refuses to give any interviews. He just blankly stares into space whenever he's in the court. So during the time just before his arrest, his wife had moved away and stopped speaking to him years ago, and he was at the time living with his adult daughter and his granddaughter. It's thought and speculated that the reason behind this, and her never divorcing him, is that she might have known about what he was doing, and he threatened her
she was terrified
to never divorce him so that she couldn't testify against him.
Oh yeah, because
married
wives
couples
can't be forced to testify.
Wives' husbands cannot testify against each other.
Can they choose to testify against each other?
They can. They can testify against each other, but they're not forced to.
Yeah, they can't be forced to.
No.
Yeah. I learnt that from Gossip Girl. That's why Blair and Chuck get married.
So according to neighbors, DeAngelo was physically fit. He was 72 at the time, but he looked like he could have been 50.
Fucking pisses me off that, like, he's got to live a life.
So he had a stationary bike in his house. He rode motorcycles. He walked around with ease. But during his time in court, he acted like this feeble old man, didn't speak, just blankly stared into nothing with his mouth open and requested a wheelchair. All of a sudden, couldn't walk around.
Yeah.
This does not fucking work. He doesn't get away with anything. He's currently awaiting trial. They said, fuck you, you're connected to this trial. We don't give a shit if you're playing this fucking old man bullshit. You are the Golden State Killer.
So he's still in jail, like being
He's
held
arrested.
for trial.
He's in jail. He's awaiting trial. It's been put on hold, unfortunately, due to coronavirus. During the trial, during the court sentence where they actually put him away to jail awaiting further trial, he just stares at the judge the entire time. Does not look away for a second. He's just staring at the judge, standing up this time. It's fucking terrifying if you watch the footage. So like I said, he's waiting trial until it was supposed to happen soon, I believe.
I hope the judge was a woman. Was the judge a woman?
I don't know. I can't actually know.
That would just...
But they're still investigating his personal belongings. Apparently, he had several mementos he kept from past victims.
Surprised. Not surprised at all. He sounds like a fucking piece of work.
So, like I said, like don't fuck with cats. Same premise, man. Fucking just internet sleuths and people coming together and connecting dots from a time where people didn't, and literally caught someone who stopped making crimes happen in the 80s.
I wonder how many like serial killers and rapists from like the 60s and 70s have seen this and are just fucking quaking in their boots. Like,
But
can you imagine being like getting arrested for some petty crime or having to had your DNA taken for some arbitrary reason, and they run it through the database and you're like, you ping on all these murders and you're like, fuck.
Shit. Yeah, that's literally it. I mean, not speaking from experience, but I'm sure it's definitely more difficult to be a criminal these days. Given the fact that they caught this guy using a company similar to 23andMe. Like, fuck, man.
Yeah, DNA, you can literally like leave a hair follicle and like they'll find it.
Hair follicles, skin cells, anything.
Good luck finding any hair follicles in our apartment in case of a crime, because there's fucking hair everywhere.
Yeah. You're
Cat
like, which hair is this? Cat
Tama
hair? My hair?
It's just a hair fest.
It really is. Well, there you go. That's the Golden State Killer. I might have gone a little bit over time on that one, so I apologize.
It's not like you to go over time.
I know. Insane.
Cool. We just had to briefly pause I needed to get my notes, and we also needed to order some nuggets.
Nuggies.
Because it's currently 10:40 and I've had 3 glasses of wine and no dinner. So it's McDonald's
3
time.
glasses of wine.
This is my 3rd glass of wine. I've not had dinner.
Oh, fuck.
All I've had today is some homemade nachos and a little bit of sticky date pudding.
How were they? Were they good?
They were pretty good.
Did you use the chicken
I
in the
used
fridge?
chicken
Nice.
and chipotle sauce and nacho chips and cheese.
Great.
It was pretty good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Boom.
Well, are you ready for the cultural debate of the century?
Because this is such a polarizing topic. It's like the Stephen Avery thing where it's like some people believe it happened, some people believe he didn't do it.
So, but the thing about the Stephen Avery thing is there's like weird evidence. That I think the thing that gets people about this is there is zero evidence. There is zero evidence to support.
Yeah, well,
there's just like weird things which, according to Carole Baskin, can all be explained, because she's done this whole big thing. I found this whole like essay on her Big Cat Rescue website that basically like refutes a lot of the stuff in Tiger King. And one of the big things, obviously, is her killing her husband. But some of the things kind of make sense. So, in case you hadn't picked up on it yet, we are going to be talking about Carole Baskin's husband.
Killed him. Husband.
Jack Donald Lewis. And perfect timing, because there's actually been a small little break in the case that broke in the news like a week or 2 back. Okay, so let's do a quick backstory, because we love to give context to our characters. So Jack Donald Lewis is born April 1938 and was a native to Florida. He was basically like born and bred Floridian.
Florida boy. Floridian.
He was actually a self-made millionaire, and it wasn't inherited.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't like
good for him.
Daddy's rich. He made his money through real estate and used car businesses, which I thought was interesting.
Strange. But I guess a different time.
Yeah. So he married his first wife, Gladys, and they had 3 daughters together and an adopted son who doesn't appear in the documentary at all, but his ex-wife and the 3 daughters do.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So, in January of 1981, Lewis meets Carole, at the time Murdoch, on the street. So, she's just fled her house after being attacked by her abusive husband at the time, Michael Murdoch. So, at the time, Carole is 20 and Don is 42, which is also something that documentary, like, obviously she's of age at that time, but it's like weirdly kind of like predatory behavior.
It kind of is.
that I
It's
don't
20
like.
years plus.
22 years difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's crying on the side of the road. He convinces her to get in his car so she can have someone to, quote, talk to, and they spend the night together. So we're talking about a 20-year-old who's married to someone who's physically abusing her.
Yeah.
This nice 42-year-old man picks her up on the side of the road in the middle of the night.
And spends the night with her.
Yeah. So, not that that makes it okay to murder someone, but like, he doesn't really sound like a stand-up
He's
character.
not the most genuine human being.
Yeah.
out
So
there.
Carole Murdoch, who is now Carole Baskins, which everyone knows her as, after she married her current husband, Howard Baskin. So Carole and Dan begin having an affair while they're both still married, and she becomes one of his many girlfriends. And she actually helps him grow his wealth by assisting with buying and selling property in 1984. So what they used to do is they would go to banks and they would buy loans. So like someone has a loan that they can't pay on their house.
Oh,
You
okay.
buy the loan and then you theoretically own the house. And that was
Shit.
actually how he grew his empire. So he actually wasn't a multimillionaire when him and Carole met.
No,
That
he was
grew
just
while they were
wealthy.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So in
Fuck.
91, Murdoch and Lewis divorced their respective spouses and they get married. In 1992, represent, they they found wildlife on Easy Street, which is now Big Cat Rescue. Which,
Yay.
for those who are living under a rock and haven't seen Tiger King, it's a big cat sanctuary, essentially.
Quote unquote sanctuary. It's up to debate, I guess.
So allegedly, Lewis and Carole clash over how to run the park. He wants to breed the cats and operate it as a business, much like Joe Exotic does, but Carole wants it to be a charity for like rescuing
Okay.
big cats in captivity and like giving them a nice place to live out their days.
Yeah.
According to Carole, Lewis was obsessed with sex, and his children have also been quoted. No, but like not in a good way. Like
Oh, okay.
his children have been quoted as saying he
I
was a
gonna say
sexaholic.
Sam, but
Like
oh, okay.
he,
Same,
according
but-
to Carole, he would demand sex like on the daily. And when she was on her period, he was so desperate he'd fucking fly to Costa Rica to have affairs with other people because he couldn't have sex with her.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So like once a month
Whoa.
for basically a week, he'd fly to Costa Rica to have affairs.
Fuck,
with
that's
people.
big money energy right there.
Yeah.
Shit.
So
And she knew, or
yeah,
didn't
she
know?
knew, and she's quoted as saying she just accepted that as part of her life. She wanted to be with him.
fucking-
That's what she'd have to
fucking
do.
rich motherfucker. Yeah, of course. 20-year-old with a 40-year-old. The fuck. What else do you think?
So Lewis had allegedly started telling family members and friends as early as 1997 that he'd always planned to move to Costa Rica eventually, permanently.
Yeah.
In late 97, he begins transferring ownership of several properties he owns in Florida into the name of a Costa Rican company that he owned. So moving
Okay.
out of his name into a company that he owned.
Yeah.
In the days leading up to his disappearance, Lewis had bought a plane ticket to Costa Rica. That's kind of important. So he's purchased a plane ticket.
Okay.
So Carole has claimed that Lewis's mental health has slowly been deteriorating in the lead up to this, and that he'd been rummaging around in dumpsters and hoarding broken vehicles and junk.
Yeah, as you do.
He was supposedly losing his short-term memory. He was sometimes disorientated, and Carole suspected him of having early onset Alzheimer's.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. However, Lewis's personal former attorney and a former business associate has disputed all of this and said that he was fine.
That's the thing. It's like you got
It's all he said, she said.
speculation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in July 1997, Lewis files for a restraining order from Carole, claiming that she's threatened to kill him and was in possession of 2 guns, and that she hid his guns to stop him from protecting himself.
Holy shit.
So the request is denied.
Holy shit.
Baskins claims he did this because whenever he'd leave to go to Costa Rica to fuck some bitches, she'd quietly try and like get rid of some of his junk that he was supposedly hoarding, and he was so angry about this that he called the police, and the police told him the only thing he could do was file for a restraining order. After this, Lewis and Carole continue living together. So he doesn't run away, doesn't move out, which again kind of supports what Carole is saying.
This is so sus, though.
Yeah.
It's like it can go either way at
Right.
this point.
So, August 18, 1997, Don Lewis disappears after leaving his home very early in the morning to make an early morning delivery of real estate signs. 2 days later, his white 1989 Dodge Ram is found at the Pilot County Airport 40 miles from his home. So at this time, Lewis owns several planes, even though he'd had his pilot license revoked, and he was noted as usually flying below the range of radar detection for that reason, because he didn't have a license.
Time too.
It's also going back to the fact that he'd been noticed as having already purchased a plane ticket. So why is he at the airport needing to fly his own plane if he's already bought a plane ticket? Yeah.
Hang on. So he's flown himself supposedly, but he has a plane ticket?
Yeah. So his car is found at the airport where his planes are, but he's bought a commercial plane ticket
to Costa
Rica. Yeah.
So, interesting.
So the keys to the van are found on the article I read said on the floorboard, which I assume is just like the back part of the van. I think.
I think a van in the 90s would have been wooden floorboards. And
alleged no evidence is found in the van. So local sheriffs at the time say they find no signs of foul play in the van or at the Catch Sanctuary, which is also where they lived. They visit Costa Rica as well, the town of, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, oh my god, Bagaces, Bagaces.
Can I quickly see it?
I just spelt it to you.
I'm not good
Bagaces.
at
Anyway, Bagaces.
Let's say it's Bagaces because that's
where
sounds funny.
Lewis owned a 220-acre park.
Okay.
The investigation lasts 5 days. They find implications that Lewis engaged in extramarital affairs, which you already knew, as well as illegal business practices, which again is kind of important.
That guy's just getting that Costa Rica pussy.
Yeah.
So
the illegal business practice is kind of important if you believe some of the theories.
Okay.
So they also find 2 of Lewis's ocelots, which, again, if you don't know, they were obsessed with big African animals. I don't think an ocelot's an ocelot is a cat. Yeah. So they'd been shipped, but no one could find where they'd been shipped to, which I don't know if it's related, but it's another a weird thing.
Yeah. No,
none of his credit cards have been used in the last few days since he's been missing. So Lewis leaves behind an estimated $5 million fortune. So in the scheme of things, though, $5 million isn't
well, I mean,
that
it's
much
not
money.
chump change for sure.
So this estate then leads to a legal dispute between Carole and Lewis's children and his ex-wife.
Yeah.
Which again brings into question how much of what they say can be deemed honest because they want his money. Some of the articles I read went into a heap of detail about them and their lives and how one of his daughters had actually been given $1 million and blown it in stocks and all this sort of stuff that I didn't go into because I thought it was a bit boring.
Okay.
So Lewis is declared legally dead in 2002, and one day after he's declared legally dead, Carole does her thing and takes all his estate. One day. She waits. 5 years and 1 day.
Yeah.
From when he went missing.
And that can also just be she just doesn't.
She could need money.
Fuck.
They got a lot of fucking tigers.
Yeah.
So I read a few different articles that had the dates kind of mixed up, so I haven't included the exact years because there are a few different years in different articles. But it said shortly after his disappearance, Carole is asked and refuses to take a polygraph test on the advice of her lawyers. She's asked again later. One article said 2008, one article said 2011, and again she refuses.
Okay.
In December 1998, Don's children go public in their interview in People magazine with the theory that Carole has ground Don up in the meat grinder and fed him to the tigers.
Yeah.
And they note that the meat grinder was never DNA tested. Okay, so In 2005, authorities start to lean towards the foul play side of things, but no one's ever charged. So, we fast forward 15 years to 2020. A strange time.
Very strange.
I've got the hiccups now. So Tiger King comes out, it explodes, and basically everyone is convinced that Carole Baskin murdered her husband and fed him to the tigers. Or the other really popular one was that they had the septic tank that she buried him in, or buried him under.
Gross.
That was the other one that Joe Exotic was pretty in love with. So using the popularity of the series, the local sheriff, Chad Chronister, which is just the best Chronister, best surname ever, they appeal to the public for leads, and they allegedly have 6 tips relating to Don Lewis's disappearance, which obviously they can't release, but allegedly. So Chronister has actually expressed a belief that he thinks a former employee of the cat park who possibly had a sour relationship will likely step forward to provide evidence against Baskins. That's what he thinks. So as of today, no one has ever formally been charged with Lewis's disappearance, nor has it officially been ruled a murder. He's just gone off the face of the planet.
Fuck.
Okay. So moving into some of the theories as to what happened. So Lewis's former lawyer, Joseph Fritz, has been pretty vocal about what he thinks has happened. So a direct quote is, "What I heard was that he was strangled from the back seat of an aeroplane over the Gulf of Mexico at 50 feet and then dropped out over the Gulf. He loved those cats. He never would have just walked away from them ever. He was proud of those cats. He loved his cats. Some force made him leave."
Right.
So Fritz
That pussy
says,
made him leave.
yeah, Fritz says he believes that Lewis was lured to the airport under the pretense of buying another plane, which would explain why his van was there.
Yeah.
And then he was murdered at the airport, taken by plane and dropped into the sea. Fritz has also publicly admitted that there is zero evidence tying Carole to Don's disappearance or his murder or whatever. So here's what Carole has said. So Carole's come forward saying that when they met, Don wasn't actually rich and she helped him create that. So basically she's saying, why would she kill him for something that was rightfully also hers as well? Which
Well, they were married. Yeah.
they were married, so
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense. So she goes into this big, as I said before, this huge essay on her Big Cat Rescue website, refuting a lot of the claims. There's a bunch of other stuff, but the biggest one is about her murdering her husband.
Of course, yeah.
So one of the other weird things that gets brought up on Tiger King was this document that Don's former executive assistant, Anne McQueen, had that he'd given to her and specifically told her should something ever happen to him or should he go missing to give it to the police. So that contained basically like the restraining order he tried to file against Carole, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Carole's made the point of the fact that this document isn't actually given to police until September, which is 2 months after his disappearance, when they're already in court proceedings about his estate.
Yeah.
So she's like, why the fuck? If this is really a document he gave you, why the fuck did you wait 2 months to give it to the police? Which you kind of like, okay. The other note in the Tiger King documentary was about how odd it was that his will, I don't know if you remember this part, his will specifically says in case of disappearance.
Yeah.
And
Wasn't it like it was altered recently? Something like that.
so Lewis's lawyer had come out saying that he'd never in his years of practice seen it worded that way, and so it seems terribly
Very
suspicious.
Sus. Yeah.
And because the original document that Anne McQueen had her as power of attorney, the new document had Carole as power of attorney, which gave her the opportunity to like put things where she wanted.
Shit. Okay.
So Carole says this was altered because Don had mentioned how people in Costa Rica go missing or disappear all the time. She'd said, and I quote, "Our Costa Rican attorney Roger Peterson and the Helicopter Brothers, who were the local version of the mafia, and Don was loaning them money. That's why I included disappearance as an event that would activate the power of attorney. I am sure attorney Joe Fritz is correct that this is unusual. However, it made perfect sense in this situation given what I was told by Don and Peterson about Costa Rica and Don's dealings there at the time.
Right.
Which again, if you're going off face value of what people are saying, it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you came to me and you were like, hey, I'm doing some shady dealings with some mafia in Costa Rica, it's likely they won't kill me, but I'll simply disappear off the face of the planet. And I don't want you to be fucked financially in that case. So let's alter this so it says disappearance as well as death.
Yeah, what a fucking strange situation.
Yeah. So the sheriff that I mentioned before, Chronister, has come out and actually disputed some of the claims that are put forth by Tiger King. The septic tank, which Joe Exotic claims he's buried under, the sheriff has said that wasn't actually installed until years after he disappeared. So it's not possible that he could be buried unless they stored his skeleton for years.
Of course.
The meat grinders that he was supposedly put into were also removed from the property years before his disappearance, but they still own them. They're just not on the property.
Yeah, they're not in use.
I mean, if you're going with that theory, he could have been taken off the property, ground up, and fed back to the tigers.
Yeah.
In the documentary series, it said that there was an employee of the park that witnessed the new will and power of attorney with Carole being signed. However, years later, the same employee came out and said that that was a lie and she was pressured to make that statement. However, by that time, the statute of limitations for forgery has passed.
Yeah.
So no one can be charged. So the most recent updates, which were about a couple of weeks ago, the news broke that the signatures on the will and the power of attorney documents are possibly forged. So Lewis's signature on the two documents appear to have been traced from his marriage record, and that the signatures of the witnesses on the marriage notary and both the will and the power of attorney are almost identical, indicating that it could also have been traced or forged.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
Well, it's just another he said,
Like
she said, another layer to add to it.
They can catch fucking the Golden State Killer who's been doing shit since the 70s, but they can't figure this shit out.
Well, I think the difference is the fact that he's technically not been murdered in the normal sense that there's a body.
Yeah, and
He
been
just
so long.
disappeared off the face of the planet.
Oh my god.
Like literally gone without a trace.
You know what's hilarious is there's this post from years ago from the Big Cat Sanctuary that Carole Baskin uploaded when she married her second husband. I can't remember his name, but she married her second husband. And
Howard.
The wording was so weird because she's like, so happy to be married to Howard, blah, blah. But she worded it, can't wait to spend the rest of his life with him. And people are like, his?
Yeah, but it's so
What the
interesting.
fuck?
Like, I think it was, what was I was listening to another podcast that was talking about when someone writes a fiction novel, when something happens that's a coincidence in a book or in a scenario where you know what's happening, you're like, oh, well, that's such a ridiculous coincidence. But stuff like that happens all the time in real life.
I'm not really disputing
No, but you know what I
anything,
mean? Like
but
when you've got a thought in
looking
your
at,
head,
it's more so just hilarious.
it's strange.
Yeah, and bizarre.
You only need to look at their wedding photos to know they're a bit odd.
Oh,
though.
they're fucking nut jobs.
Yeah. Another article I read now, I didn't note it down and I can't remember who noted this. I think it might have also been his former lawyer, Fritz, possibly.
Okay.
Don't yell at me if that's wrong.
fuck?
That Don had a habit of, he would happily lend people money, but he would often piss people off because he'd put such a high interest percentage on the repayments that he'd previously had an incident that almost turned really nasty when he'd lent someone money and then he'd input such a huge interest on it. So I guess if you're going off what Carole said about him having dealings with this mafia in Costa Rica, if he's loaning them money and then being like, yeah, I'm gonna need that back now with
Yeah.
80% interest, thank you.
Hey, dangerous mafia who could kill me.
Yeah.
That money I gave you,
So-
well, you owe me more than the previous amount.
It's interesting in the same way I think that last week's one, Elisa Lam, is interesting because there's just really no evidence.
Yeah. And there's no
And
really
so
way to come to a
because there's
conclusion.
no evidence, it just allows people's minds to go crazy.
That's what's so tantalizing about it is it sucks that there's a crime that's possibly been committed, but it's like we as humans need to find some sort of answer to the question.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck happened?
And I'm also
We
a
need to
firm
know.
believer that when it comes to as soon as money is involved,
Yeah,
you
it
can't
gets
trust a
very-
fucking word
I
anyone
know.
says.
Yeah.
So like children or not, you're going to feel like you got the raw end of the deal. She got the majority of his estate and all you got was like a measly
Couple
$1 million.
Yeah.
Carole also argues on her website that her daughters said that because she was power of attorney, she got to decide which assets went to
Yeah.
who and gave them like the shitty
Yes.
assets.
Sorry
She's come out,
to interrupt.
yeah,
But at the time of his death, he said he had around 5-6 million.
yeah.
So if each of his daughters are getting 1 mil,
Well, I don't know. Carole got majority of
his estate.
his estate and stuff.
But if it's
I think they got assets. So
Right.
I don't really know how it
because
works.
if he's worth 6 mil,
That's what I mean. It's not an enormous amount of
no,
money.
and if they're getting
It's not like Jeff
if they're
Bezos.
getting 1 mil each, that's 3 daughters, $3
Yeah.
million. That's half of his net worth
Yeah.
supposedly.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's like it's sorry to interrupt you, but it's like
It's all like, again, it's all hearsay. Like,
yeah,
Carole Baskin's also goes into stuff saying like
He's
the
not that
reason the will was rewritten was because he had fallings out with his family and didn't want them in the will.
well, yeah, of course.
Which, again, if you're looking at it through the glasses of she's murdered her husband, all of that looks really sus. If you look at it through the lens of he's been kidnapped and murdered by Costa Rican mafia, then all of that stops looking so suspicious. And
Yeah.
it's just a weird, again, like you were saying, in a fiction book, you'd read all that and be like, oh, that's ridiculously coincidental.
Yeah.
In real life, shit like that actually happens.
I wonder how this has affected the big cat sanctuary.
I'm sure their business is
reckon?
skyrocketing. Yes. I want to go.
Because I feel like
As if
I
you
don't know.
wouldn't want to meet the woman who supposedly killed her
Yeah,
husband,
but I
ground him
mean,
up, and
like-
fed him to the tigers.
But I mean, like, yeah, like, I don't know about the numbers, but like in terms of like publicity and
yeah.
people on their Facebook and Instagram and shit, like,
No,
I'm
I
sure
think
she's
I
used
think
to
they'd be
people
doing
harassing
quite
her.
well for themselves. She also makes the point, which again is also true, is you don't grind up an entire human being in a meat grinder. Like, have you ever used an actual meat grinder?
yeah,
They don't grind up bones. Like, you have to cut the meat.
yeah, it's not. You can't.
Like, it's not like a
It doesn't
garbage disposal for
grind up
humans.
bones.
Like,
Was the point that she ground them up into mince?
and fed them to the tigers. Yeah, that's the theory.
Because wasn't the theory that she chopped the body parts up and gave it to the tigers because tigers eat the entire thing, including bones?
I don't think they do though.
They do.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was one of the points.
I
that was
can't
made.
say I know that much about tigers.
The really fucking weird dude who had multiple wives. You remember the guy?
Which one? There's about 5.
No, like there was one.
There's literally about 3
There's
of them
2.
that are weird and have
There's-
multiple wives.
There's 2 guys that have multiple wives. The one that had, he was like a big breeder, not the one that Joey Exotic fucked over or got fucked over by.
Oh yeah,
the other
The
one.
Doc.
Yeah,
Doc
the Doc,
Abel?
that guy who like
Doc Abel, is that
who's-
his name?
who
Yeah.
sold like a lot of his cats to
Yeah.
to everyone included.
He's
in the-
essentially running a sex harem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy, I think, made the claim that tigers will eat
Yeah.
entire, like, because you see them get thrown entire deer legs, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, the whole thing's fucking gone.
But it was what's fucked up, it was his children that were the first people that publicly suggested she's ground him
She's
up in a meat grinder
yeah.
and fed him to the tigers.
There's no
Like,
clear actual evidence.
For me,
that
that's
happened.
another thing that kind of makes it seem like
very sus.
it's very sus because,
Yeah.
like, what? Your dad he's disappeared.
Yeah,
And
how
this
have
is
you come
only
to this
like
conclusion?
a year after he's
Yeah,
disappeared.
and how have you come to
very
this? What have you found
fresh.
that makes you think this?
And just like what? I mean, obviously everyone grieves differently, so I can't judge, but it just seems odd that you would jump to that conclusion.
You know what's just fucking bizarre? Is,
What?
Sorry to interrupt you and go back to the
Again.
Golden State Killer. Is with Patton Oswalt after McNamara passed away. Just a year later, he's remarried.
Yeah,
feels kinda
sometimes that
weird.
happens.
You know
I
what I
don't know.
mean?
You don't know what goes on behind closed
I
doors,
know,
I
but it
guess.
just feels so odd.
But it's also like sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you just meet people and fall in love.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I feel like if God forbid you'd passed away, I don't know if I would be like in a year. I'd be like, whoa, I need some sort of, like, you know, sure I would need interaction with people, but I don't know if I would need a relationship.
But I guess sometimes you just like fall into it.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Anyway, I feel like this episode has gone for a
Fuck
very...
it. This is the special, you know, things have been fucked over for us episode, so we just kind of do.
We basically just
thing.
got drunk, ate McDonald's, and had a podcast.
It's been the best podcast so far, in my opinion.
I actually really liked last week's. I think that was one of our best.
What was last week's one? Ed Gein?
Elisa Lamb and Ed Gein.
Yeah,
That was a good one.
that was a good one actually.
That was a good one.
The Ed Gein story is pretty.
Well,
fucked up.
anyway, now that the murder portion of the podcast is complete, we're going to just move right on into our ASMR portion.
This is the sound of tigers crunching through the bones of Carole Baskin's husband.
That was such an anticlimactic noise.
Hang
What is
on. Wait.
Yeah, that's bad.
Shall we whisper our outro?
Yeah, are we just gonna end the episode?
Thank you so much for tuning in.
Are we just gonna actually end the episode like this?